alert! Learning is important, right?
Yes, exactly. What a bunch of nerds.
Nerd alert!
Right.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines.
Hello, hello.
We're back with your weekly Nerd Alert. Every week, I'll take a deep dive into academic marketing research and translate its complex ideas into simple, understandable language for Rob. And of course, for all of you, are you ready to nerd out, Rob?
I am happy to nerd with you today, Elena. Let's do this.
All right, let's get into it. As always, we'll link the research we cover in the episode notes. This week, I read The Effect of Weather on Consumer Spending by Kyle Murray, Adam Finn, and Peter T.L. Popkowski Leszczyc. But first, Rob, how do you think weather influences consumer behavior with brands?
Oh man, well, having been born and raised in Minnesota, where we have very distinct seasons, you definitely experience how weather can drive interest for particular brands. I mean, just yesterday, we were having a huge, I don't know what you would call that, wind, snow, freezing Halloween event.
Snowstorm?
And
Blizzard?
It was just one of those.
It was rough.
And it was. And I had to be out on a Minnesota lake during that time, thinking to myself, soup is good food the whole time. I'm like, oh, I really could use.
That even sounds good to me.
Doesn't it? It's just like, oh, it's like the classic Campbell's soup line. Soup is good food kept resonating. Like, I could really use some soup when I get back.
Well, you're right. Weather has a pretty big effect on consumer behavior and spending patterns. And this study explores that. And it specifically looks into sunlight, which is fun. So the research focuses on how exposure to sunlight affects consumer moods and how those mood shifts impact their spending habits. We've all heard the anecdotes about sunny days lifting our spirits, but this study goes further. They provide empirical evidence to support the link between sunlight and consumer spending. They conducted 3 different studies to test their theory using both lab and field data. So these authors, they start by acknowledging the general effects weather has on human behavior. For instance, we tend to wear different clothes or spend more time indoors based on the weather. But they wanted to dig deeper, specifically into how weather might impact consumer spending. So their hypothesis was straightforward. As sunlight increases, negative emotions, which they describe those as negative effects, decrease, which leads to an increase in consumer spending. In the study, they analyzed 6 years of sales data from a small independent retail store to see if any weather variables like temperature or snowfall were correlated with sales. They found that sunlight had a significant effect on spending, particularly when temperatures were lower. So if it's a cooler day, more sunlight increased sales of products like tea. The second study built on these findings looked at how weather affects mood. So they used panel data from participants who tracked their daily moods and spending over the course of 20 days. Once again, sunlight was found to reduce negative effect, meaning that as people felt better emotionally, they tended to spend more. Their final study took place in a controlled lab setting, where participants were exposed to artificial sunlight and then asked how much they were willing to pay for various products, which I think is super fun. And they found that if you were exposed to sunlight, you were willing to spend more across the board. So that's on everything from tea to gym memberships than those who were in a control group. So this study is a short but sweet one. It sheds light on,
there you go.
I came up with that myself, on the importance of understanding how environmental factors like weather can influence consumer behavior. So as marketers, we often focus on what consumers want, but understanding when they're likely to buy, category entry points, if you will, based on the weather, it could be valuable. So Rob, what do you think? Do you think that there's potential for brands to adjust their marketing according to different weather patterns?
I think absolutely, in this world of customized creative and the ability to generate things based on geography and time of day, it just becomes another factor to make it more tailored, experience for the customer. To what would you sell if it was raining outside? Or we were just talking about if it was cold outside and getting a pop-up for hot cocoa on your mobile device. So absolutely. I'm actually interested too, on the flip side of it, is how do you bring weather into a retail environment? You were talking about lighting and like how, obviously that's a whole craft in and of itself. And I'm sure many people are already out there going, yeah, we think about this all the time, Rob, great, but definitely not the first. But when you think about the power of artificial light in certain environments to be able to inspire certain types of products being purchased, You'd almost think like retailers would probably spend a lot of time thinking about that.
It's funny. When I go to Target, I want to buy everything, and it is really bright in there. So
Yeah,
maybe
maybe
that has
there's
an impact on things. But I agree. I really like this. And we are sort of critical of targeting on the show because typically adding a bunch of third-party targeting layers, there's such a high bar because it adds price. So to make it really effective, it's difficult and they're not always accurate. And there's also arguments about data privacy and is it right for brands to know personal details about you? I love this idea because it's just the weather. It'd be great if you could just optimize to, is it going to be, sunny in Minnesota today? Then we're going to, push these certain products. It's just kind of fun. And I could see how it would work. And I haven't felt that myself yet from advertisements. Like I don't feel them shift because of the weather. I'm guessing this kind of stuff is still to come and AI is probably going to help. But I think that's fun. You love like on a cozy day, you start to see like advertisements that better reflect your mood and the weather. I think that'll be a positive thing.
Well, weather's such a driver of certain industries too. So there are the more obvious examples, and these are not the fun ones to talk about, but when things like a hurricane happens, there's a lot of different businesses that help service those types of areas. And so weather triggered events can certainly be a reason for certain industries to target specific areas on an almost reactive basis rather quickly.
It'd be funny to look into. I wonder if you could see this in the data that certain places in the US are sunnier than others. Like I think about, say, like Washington is more cloudy. I think that's true. I only learned that from the Twilight series, but I believe that
I think it has that reputation.
Yeah, and I wonder if their sales data would differ from like Southern California, where you have, or even us in Minnesota. I mean, things get pretty gloomy here over the winter months. But then what was fun about the study is I think about Minnesota when it could be 10 degrees, but those sunny winter days do feel different than a
Yes.
cloudy, dreary one.
For sure. You also wonder, like my daughter's going to school in California now, and it's like the same weather all year round. So
Is she buying more stuff? Can you track a change?
that's a good point.
Yeah.
But do they see less of a fluctuation there of certain categories? Probably, compared to a Minnesota where we get the extreme weather differences.
I think it's fun though that this found that if like all categories get a boost. So when it's sunny outside, and they said like everything they tested, like gym memberships, like food, like they just did a bunch of different things, and it all increased.
People are just in a buying mood.
Oh, I have a Rob GPT. This study shows that sunlight is like nature's secret sales boost. When it brightens our mood, it loosens our grip on our wallets. Essentially, the sunnier the day, the more likely we are to splurge. Probably didn't need that, but we got it anyways.
I love it.
That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Taylor De Los Reyes for producing the show. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you like the podcast, please leave us a review. Now go forth and build great marketing.
Marketing Architects.